the man with the wrong name tag. The sun had not yet risen over the dusty hills of the Nevada training base, but the whistle shrieked across the barracks like a slap to the soul. The air was still cold, sharp with morning silence, but inside, boots hit the floor, mattresses creaked, and voices grumbled into motion. It was the first day of boot camp. It was supposed to be about discipline, brotherhood, and proving something. But for one man, it was the beginning of something no one expected, not even him. Keanu Reeves stood quietly in the corner of the bunk room, adjusting his name tag, which had been misprinted. It said, Kenneth Rivers. No one believed it was a mistake. Some thought he was faking his identity. Others thought he was playing some Hollywood joke. But the truth was simpler. Someone in admin messed up the paperwork and Keanu didn't bother to correct it. Not yet. The moment he walked out into the courtyard, the whispers started. That's the actor guy, right? What's he doing? Here? Filming a movie? Probably can't even do 10 push-ups without a stunt double. The instructor, Sergeant Hawthorne, a man whose voice sounded like gravel being chewed by steel, stared at Keanu with the kind of intensity that could melt metal. Kenneth Rivers, he shouted, glancing at his clipboard. You think boot camp is some red carpet event? Keanu looked him in the eye and said quietly, No, sir. Then wipe that look off your face. This ain't no movie set. The rest of the recruits snickered. Keanu didn't say a word. He just nodded and joined the line. The day began with running, then more running, then push-ups, and more push-ups. Keanu didn't complain, but the looks never stopped. The jabs grew sharper. Hey, Hollywood, try to keep up, barked a bulky recruit named Collins. He was the loudest, strongest, and most determined to humiliate Keanu. Keanu was not the fastest, not the strongest. But he was something no one else. There was, quietly relentless. At lunch, Keanu sat alone with his tray of beans and rice. The others laughed about him, right within earshot. They mocked his movies, his age, his calm nature. They didn't understand why he was there. They didn't know that he came not to prove anything to them, but to himself. It had been 10 years since the accident. 10 years since he lost his brother in a crash during a humanitarian mission. His brother had served, worn the uniform proudly. And Keanu had carried that guilt like a shadow stitched to his heels. So when the opportunity came, when the training program opened to civilians under a special outreach initiative, Keanu signed up. No fanfare, no press. Just a man walking into a place to feel something real again. Sergeant Hawthorne noticed him struggling during rope drills. Come on, Rivers. Don't tell me you're scared of heights now. Keanu's hands bled as he climbed. But he didn't look down. He didn't scream. And when he reached the top, he didn't even smile. He just climbed back down and lined up again. By the third day, bruises had formed on his forearms. His back ached. Sleep came like a whisper and left like a thief. But he kept going. Always the last to complain, always the first to help another pick up their dropped gear. One night, while the rest played cards and shared stories, Keanu sat alone, wrapping his blistered feet. That's when Collins walked in, smirking. So what's your deal, Hollywood? Collins asked, dropping his gear on the bench. You think this place is going to fix something inside you? Keanu looked up, tired but calm. No, I think it's going to remind me who I was before the lights. Collins laughed, shaking his head. Man, you're not one of us. You'll be gone in a week. Keanu didn't answer. He just nodded slowly, like a man who had heard worse and lived through it. The humiliation came hard the next morning. During weapons assembly training, Keanu's fingers fumbled. He dropped a bolt. The instructor yelled. The recruits groaned. Collins laughed the loudest. Should have brought your movie prop instead. But that night, something changed. A storm rolled in, unexpected and violent. Lightning struck the north generator unit near the base's emergency fuel store. Alarms blared. Power flickered. Smoke began to rise. Panic spread like fire. Some recruits ran. Others froze. But Keanu moved. Not fast, not blindly, but with the strange focus of someone who had seen worse chaos in silence. He grabbed 2 fire blankets and ran toward the generator bay. "Rivers, get back here." Hawthorne's voice echoed through the rain, but Keanu didn't stop. Inside, flames had licked the outer shell of the fuel tanks. A young recruit was trapped under a fallen support beam, gasping for air. Keanu threw the blanket over them both and dropped low. "We're getting out of here," he whispered. With fire all around and smoke choking the night, Keanu used a metal pole to wedge the beam off just enough to pull the recruit free. He carried him through the smoke, shielding his face. Just as the tank ruptured and sent a shockwave through the air, Keanu dove behind a concrete barrier, cradling the recruit. Fire crews arrived minutes later. The generator bay was destroyed, but the fuel store was untouched, and every life was accounted for. In the debrief, Hawthorne stared at Keanu for a long time. The room was silent. "Rivers," he said slowly, his voice lacking its usual sharpness. "What were you thinking?" Keanu replied simply, "He needed help. I was there." For the first time, the recruits didn't laugh. They didn't joke. They looked at him differently now. Not as a celebrity, not as a mistake, but as one of them. As the smoke cleared that night and the base returned to order, Sergeant Hawthorne walked over to the admin office and made one quiet change to the roster. The next morning, a new name tag sat on Keanu's bed. It read, Keanu Reeves. But just as things began to settle, a military convoy arrived at the base unexpectedly. And with it came a secret assignment. A high-security drill unlike anything the camp had ever seen. One that would demand more than just strength or training, and the base had no idea that their quietest recruit would soon become their only hope. The assignment no one wanted. The morning after the fire, the base woke up under a strange silence. Not the usual stillness of early dawn, but something heavier, like the air itself was holding its breath. The smoke from the generator fire had cleared, but the tension had not. Guards moved with urgency. Communication lines buzzed constantly. Something was coming. Something big. Keanu stood near the mess hall with his tray untouched. His hands still bore faint burn marks. He'd been offered medical leave, even a quiet discharge with honor, but he refused. He didn't want special treatment. Not now. Not after what had happened. He didn't want to be the hero of a single night. He wanted to prove he could be there every day, no matter what. As he sat alone, the heavy boots of Sergeant Hawthorne echoed behind him. "Grab your gear, Reeves," the sergeant said. "You've been assigned." Keanu looked up. "Assigned to what?" "Something we've never done before. A live disaster simulation. Classified, off-base. And they want you in it." Word spread fast. The assignment was meant to test the recruits beyond physical limits. It was created in collaboration with military intelligence and emergency response units. Real structures, real conditions, and one real twist. None of the recruits would be told who was truly in charge until the operation began. Most of the trainees hoped to avoid it. Some tried to fake injuries. But Keanu, silent as ever, packed his bag and stood ready before the others. Collins watched him from a distance, unsure whether to mock or admire. Something about Keanu's calmness made him uncomfortable now. They were flown by helicopter into a remote part of the desert. The land below was scorched and empty, surrounded by mountains and dense canyons. No signs of life, just a large hangar, surrounded by blackout tents and crates. It looked like the aftermath of a secret war. Inside the main tent, a tall woman in a gray suit briefed them. She didn't smile. "This simulation is designed to test leadership under pressure," she said. "A civilian town has gone dark. Power grid destroyed, communications offline, supplies contaminated. Inside that replica town, there are actors trained to mimic real civilians in crisis. Some will resist, some will panic, some will lie. Your job is to secure the area, assess threats, and protect everyone." There was a pause. "One of you," she continued, "has been assigned a hidden command role. They know more than the rest of you. You won't know who it is, not until the final phase." The recruits exchanged glances. Suspicion bloomed instantly. Whispers started. Who was the leader? Keanu didn't flinch. He just looked at the dusty map in front of him, already memorizing the landmarks. They were dropped into the simulated town an hour later. The place was eerily real. Broken power lines, smoke-filled buildings, and panicked civilians shouting in alleys. Keanu moved quietly, observing more than reacting. He watched how the others rushed, how they shouted over each other. No one was listening. They were all trying to lead. Within minutes, arguments erupted. Collins tried taking charge, barking orders. Two others pushed back, convinced they were right. Chaos unfolded. Civilians in the simulation began to panic more, adding to the confusion. Keanu found a child actor curled under a truck. Her voice trembled as she whispered, "They're coming. They said they'll burn everything." He knelt beside her, offering a water bottle. "Who's coming?" Men in black masks. They took the others. It was supposed to be a drill, but the fear in her eyes looked real. Keanu guided her back toward the command tent, only to find it was gone, disassembled. Part of the test. They were now cut off. As darkness fell, tempers boiled. One recruit punched another. Accusations flew. "He's the hidden commander." "No, she is." But no one had clarity. And then came the unplanned moment. A hidden underground bunker door blew open with a real explosion. Dust and metal flew through the air. Two recruits were injured. Real injuries, not simulation. Someone had tampered with the scenario. Someone not part of the test. Panic rippled through the group. Medics were unreachable. Radio channels were dead. And that's when Keanu stepped forward. "We need to secure the injured, find stable shelter. Move them away from the wind direction," he said clearly, not shouting but commanding attention. For the first time, no one argued. He directed, 2 to build stretchers, another to gather clean cloth for pressure wraps. And he didn't stop there. He divided the team into quiet pairs, each tasked with a single goal: retrieve, report, protect. He made everyone repeat their tasks back to him, calmly. Hours passed. Slowly, order returned. Fires were managed. Civilians guided to shelters. Even Collins followed his directions. Quietly, without question. As dawn painted the hills with soft gold, a helicopter landed just outside the simulated town. High-ranking officers stepped out along with the woman in the gray suit. They found the recruits lined up in calm order, the injured stable, the town quiet again. The woman looked around, stunned. "Who took command?" she asked. Collins stepped forward, pointing. "Him, Keanu." She looked at Keanu, eyebrows raised. "You knew the role?" Keanu shook his head. "No, I just saw what needed to be done." There was silence, then slow clapping from the officers. Not theatrical, not dramatic. Just quiet respect. But as the group boarded the helicopter, a man stepped out from the shadows, holding a silver badge with a strange symbol on it. He walked straight up to Keanu and whispered, "You weren't supposed to be part of this, Mr. Reeves, but now that you are, we need to talk. There's something real happening, and it's not part of any drill." Keanu looked him in the eyes, steady. "What do you mean?" he asked. The man replied, "Because this time, the danger isn't simulated, and it's already inside the base, whispers beneath the runway." When Keanu stepped off the helicopter and onto the base again, everything looked normal. Drills continued. Recruits moved in lines. Instructors barked orders. But after what had happened in the simulated town, normal now felt like a performance, something thin and artificial. And the man with the silver badge hadn't returned. He'd vanished before the blades even touched down. Keanu didn't talk about it. Not yet. Not until he understood what that man meant. Not until he could separate fear from fact. That night, while most of the base rested, Keanu went to the maintenance bay under the excuse of cleaning gear. Instead, he followed the memory of that badge. Its symbol, a triangle within a circle, not part of any branch he recognized. Deep in a back storage room, he found old crates with the same symbol, half covered in dust and canvas. He crouched, near one, brushing it clean. Beneath it were documents sealed in plastic tagged Operation Black Echo, The name meant nothing to him. Not yet. But the word echo kept ringing in his mind. Behind him, a quiet voice broke the silence. "You shouldn't be here." Keanu stood slowly and turned. It was Private Elias, one of the quieter recruits from the drill. Pale, observant, always at the edge of the group. Now he stood in the doorway, half lit by a flickering bulb. "You saw him too, didn't you?" Keanu asked. Elias hesitated, then stepped in. "The man with the badge." "Yeah, I saw him last week. He tried to recruit me, said something was coming, something already inside." Keanu leaned forward. "Did he tell you what it was?" Elias swallowed hard. "Not exactly. He said the drills weren't training, they were filters. They're looking for people who don't panic, people who act when everything falls apart." "And then?" "Then they disappear," Elias whispered. 3 recruits from the last batch gone. Official reason? Reassigned, but their bunkmates said they left at night and never came back. Keanu felt his pulse slow, not quicken. Slow. That cold stillness again. The next morning, the base commander arrived unexpectedly. General Barrack, a name known across the force. Decorated, ruthless, efficient. He rarely visited boot camps, and never without a reason. He called all recruits into the courtyard. His voice was clipped, emotionless. "Recent events have shown weaknesses in leadership, in cohesion, in trust. We are now entering a restricted training phase. Only select individuals will continue." Whispers rippled through the lines. Barrack raised a hand. "These decisions are not yours to question. If your name is not called, return to quarters and await discharge." Names were read. When Keanu Reeves was called, the silence grew louder. He stepped forward. No one said a word. Even Collins, standing nearby, didn't move, didn't smirk. He just watched. Afterward, Keanu was led to a different part of the base. Underground, where no sunlight touched the halls, where the walls weren't made of plaster but reinforced steel. A new instructor greeted them, Major Eldridge, tall, narrow-eyed, and silent for long stretches. He didn't ask them to introduce themselves. He didn't welcome them. He simply said, "If you've been brought here, it's because you passed something we don't talk about." Then he pulled out a photograph. It showed a satellite image. Desert terrain. But something stood out. A dark rectangular structure buried in the sand, barely visible. Not on any maps. "2 nights ago," Eldridge said, "a seismic anomaly was detected near this site. We believe it to be the remnants of a Cold War bunker. Officially, it doesn't exist. But our instruments recorded heat signatures. Movement, not human. And we're sending you in." Keanu raised an eyebrow. "Why not a full unit?" Eldridge stared at him. "Because full units already tried. They didn't come back. They were briefed, outfitted with special equipment, and led to an armored transport. Elias was with them, pale and silent. 2 others, a medic named James and a communications expert named Lana, completed the group. As the vehicle roared into the desert night, Keanu stared out at the open emptiness and thought of his brother again, of promises made in silence, of the look in his mother's eyes when the flag had been handed to her. They reached the site before dawn. Sand had shifted, revealing part of a broken steel hatch. Scorch marks lined the edges. The air smelled of old metal and something harder to name. They descended slowly. The tunnel groaned around them like a sleeping creature. Inside, the walls were lined with old wires and rusted panels. It was colder than the desert outside, and quieter. Too quiet. They split into 2 groups. Keanu and Elias moved through a corridor that looked untouched by time. Flickering lights buzzed weakly overhead. Then, without warning, they found it. A chamber with strange markings on the walls. Not military, not scientific. Almost ceremonial. In the center was a chair bolted to the floor. Restraints dangled from the arms. And beside it, a device still glowing faintly. Not built by any military Keanu knew. Elias touched it. The lights flared, and suddenly, the air around them shifted. Not physically, but in a way the body feels before the brain understands, like standing on a fault line seconds before it cracks. A voice filled the room. Not from a speaker, not from any one place. It just was. You've awakened it. Keanu's blood ran cold. Awakened what? He whispered. But the voice didn't answer. Instead, from the far end of the hallway came a slow metallic screech. Dragging, deliberate, not human. Keanu raised his flashlight, and for the first time he saw something he could not explain. It had once worn a man's uniform, but its body was wrong. Stretched, burned, fused with pieces of gear. Its mouth hung open, but no breath came. Its eyes glowed faintly blue, like failing batteries, and something deep inside it whispered not words but memories. Pain. Run, Keanu said softly. They did. But as they fled back through the halls, dodging the thing behind them, another thought clawed at Keanu's mind. If this was real? If this was truly inside the base like the man with the badge had warned, then this wasn't a discovery. It was a containment breach. The thing that remembers paint. The storm above the desert had begun to churn by the time Keanu and Elias scrambled out of the underground corridor. Wind whipped across the sand like needles. Thunder rolled over the empty landscape. But the worst part wasn't outside. It was still coming, still dragging itself through the dark hallways below, closer now. Keanu didn't look back. He didn't need to. The air itself carried the sound of metal grinding bone. They reached the extraction point breathless, hands scraped, boots caked with dust and panic. But there was no transport waiting, no radio response, just wind and silence, and a strange pulsing hum from beneath the ground. Elias dropped to one knee, coughing. What the hell was that thing? Keanu didn't answer right away. He was staring at his hands. They were shaking. Not from fear exactly, from something deeper. Recognition, memory. Long ago, during a film shoot overseas, he'd visited a research facility for character reference. One of the doctors had pulled him aside and said something odd. Some machines don't need circuits, they just need pain they can't forget. At the time, Keanu had thought it was a metaphor. Now, he wasn't so sure. Within an hour, the emergency response team arrived. Black jeeps, black uniforms, faces without names. They didn't ask questions. They didn't take statements. They just sealed off the site and took the remaining 4 recruits, Keanu, Elias, James, and Lana, back to a hidden sector of the base that none of them had seen before. Not even Elias. It wasn't built like the rest of the facility. It was newer, colder, glass walls, cameras in every corner. Inside, an officer in a dark blue coat waited. He didn't introduce himself. Didn't blink much either. You were not meant to encounter Subject 9, he said flatly. But now you have, and protocol requires full containment of the threat and of the witnesses. Keanu sat down slowly. You're saying we're prisoners? No, the man said. You're assets. He turned to a screen behind him. A grainy image appeared, taken from the underground chamber. The creature, clearer now. Its features warped, but recognizably human. A tattoo on its left wrist still visible. Keanu leaned forward. He knew that mark. That's a Special Forces insignia, he said. The man nodded. Operation Black Echo, 1993. A classified experiment in psychological warfare enhancement. They tried to train minds to survive torture by fusing human memory with predictive AI. The result was instability, madness, and something worse, intelligence without limits. James, the medic, stood up. You kept that thing alive, underground? We didn't keep it alive, the officer said. We couldn't kill it, Lana swallowed hard. And now it's out. Keanu felt the weight in the room shift. They weren't just being told this, they were being measured, tested. Someone was watching their reactions. Maybe even Subject 9 itself. That night, the base went dark. It wasn't a power outage. It was a severance, controlled and precise. All external signals cut, inner circuits rerouted, doors began to lock in patterns, lights flickered like breathing. Keanu woke to the sound of alarms, not the sharp military ones, but something deeper, like a mechanical heartbeat gone wild. In the corridor outside his room, smoke had begun to leak through the vents. Red emergency, lights blinked in rhythm. James and Lana were already awake, armed with rifles they had taken from an abandoned security checkpoint. Elias held a map, half burned, half stolen, from a file cabinet just hours before. "We think Subject 9's using the old maintenance tunnels," Elias said quickly. "We need to reach the generator room before it does." Keanu didn't hesitate. They moved as a unit, ducking under fallen beams and weaving through empty halls that smelled of rust and dust. Every shadow felt too thick, every silence too loud. Twice. They heard it, dragging, slow, steady, like it wasn't chasing them, just following, remembering. In one hallway, they found a soldier, slumped and unmoving, still breathing, but his eyes were open wide as if he had seen something that broke him. On the wall behind him was a single message, scrawled in ash. "I remember you." James stopped. "What does that mean?" Keanu turned away. "It means this. Thing isn't just random. It's selecting." They reached the generator room moments later, only to find the door sealed shut by a strange lock. Not standard, not even military. It was shaped like the same symbol from the man's badge, a triangle within a circle, etched into the control panel. Beneath it, a single input slot. Keanu reached into his pocket, pulled out something small, a metal pin, one he'd found in the underground chamber but kept hidden, not knowing why. Now he did. He pressed it into the slot. The panel lit up. The lock clicked. Inside, the generator room still hummed. The backup systems were untouched, but something else was waiting. On the wall opposite the controls stood a screen, not connected to any terminal, not wired in. And yet, as they stepped inside, it flickered on, a face appeared. Not clearly, not fully, just fragments. Eyes, lips, scars, and a voice not mechanical, not human, something in between. "You found me," it said. Keanu stepped forward. "Why us?" the voice responded, glitching between tones. "Because you don't look away." Images flashed on the screen. Memories, not Keanu's, not any of theirs, but someone's. Flashes of training, pain, war, betrayal, a soldier screaming inside a metal shell. "You see what they made me?" it whispered. "Now you'll help me stop it." Keanu clenched his fists. "Stop what?" The voice didn't answer. But beneath their feet, the floor began to vibrate. Not from machines, from footsteps. Something was coming. Something that didn't crawl or drag anymore. Subject 9 was walking. The thing that walks like memory. The vibration under the floor wasn't just movement, it was rhythm, deliberate, like it was announcing its arrival. And that rhythm clawed its way up through the steel beneath their boots, then into their legs, into their spines, into their hearts. Keanu felt it settle into his chest. Not like fear, but like recognition. Something ancient. Something built, from pain and wrapped in machinery. James gripped his rifle tighter. "This door won't hold." Keanu stepped to the generator panel. "We don't need it to. We're not staying." Elias looked at him. "Then where do we go?" Keanu glanced, back at the dark screen, now lifeless again, and pointed toward the far wall of the room. "The air filtration tunnels. If we shut down the main fans, we can crawl through. They connect to the upper compound." Lana raised a brow. "And if it follows?" Keanu didn't answer. He didn't need to. It wasn't an if, it was a when. They moved fast. Keanu led, sliding open the small emergency panel hidden behind a supply shelf. The tunnel was tight, barely enough room to crawl, and lined with decades of dust and stale air. It felt like squeezing through forgotten veins of a dying beast. As they crawled, the metal behind them shook again. The main door, something heavy, struck it. Again. Then silence. Keanu paused mid-crawl. Too much silence. It wasn't giving up. It was thinking. They emerged into the auxiliary hub, an older section of the base, long sealed off after structural damage. Cracks ran across the walls. Parts of the ceiling sagged. Water dripped in rhythm with their breathing, but they weren't alone. In the middle of the room stood a figure. Tall. Still, at first glance it looked like a man. But then it turned. Its face was a mask of twisted metal and melted flesh, a mouth carved open wider than any scream could justify. Its eyes blinked with a blue flicker, not from sight, but from thought. And in its left hand, it held a broken dog tag. Keanu's breath caught. He recognized the number etched on the tag. It belonged to a soldier named Randall Tice. His brother's closest friend, the man who had disappeared during a Black Ops mission a decade ago. A mission everyone claimed never existed. It remembers the people we don't, Keanu whispered. The creature didn't attack. It just stood there watching, studying them like a mirror studies a face. Elias aimed his rifle. "We should..." "No," Keanu said sharply. "It's not hostile, not yet." But as they stepped around the thing, its head followed Keanu, and from its distorted throat came a sound. Not a growl, not a word. It was a name. "Christopher." Keanu froze. "What did you say?" The thing repeated it, softer, broken. "Christopher." Keanu's stomach sank. That was his brother's name. No one here knew that. No one ever spoke it aloud, but the thing had. And suddenly, the flickers of memory from the underground terminal clicked together like puzzle pieces snapping into place. Subject 9 wasn't a singular entity. It was a collector. A graveyard of minds, tied together by trauma, memories scraped from soldiers and stitched into machinery until it could feel, think, remember. They weren't dealing with a weapon. They were facing a soul forged in war. But before Keanu could speak, alarms blared through the entire base. Red lights, warning tones. Something had triggered full containment mode. Blast doors were sealing. The facility was preparing for total lockdown. Lana shouted over the noise. "We have to get out of here now." Keanu grabbed the nearest terminal. It was old, flickering but still responsive. He typed fast, pulling up evacuation schematics. Most paths were locked. Except one, a cargo elevator used only for deep storage. As they ran, the creature followed. Not fast, not slow. Just steady. But Keanu noticed something else. Each time the alarms echoed, the thing flinched. Twitched. Its body pulsed with interference like the sirens heard it. Not physically, but cognitively. The sound reminded it of something buried. Keanu turned to the others. "We're not escaping it. We have to reach it. Not the body. The core." Elias looked confused. "The what?" "Every system here connects to a command room beneath the old flight strip," Keanu explained. "It was used during training missions. If we get there, we can reach the central node. That's where it lives, where the memory net loops." James hesitated. "And then what?" "Then we give it a choice." They reached the cargo elevator moments before the lower levels sealed. The doors closed with a screech, and the platform began to descend. Each second felt like a fall through time. On the way down, Keanu spoke softly. "My brother used to talk in his sleep. Not about war, about regrets. Voices he heard, people he couldn't save." He looked at them, then at the quiet shape beside him. Subject 9. What if something out there heard those voices? What if it never forgot? The elevator hit the bottom with a jolt. The doors opened into a chamber made of black steel and humming circuits. Screens lined the walls, each flashing fragments of past missions, medical reports, combat footage, and in the center, one terminal. Untouched. Waiting. Keanu approached. The screen lit up without touch. Login accepted. Reeves. Cheese hand trembled. This wasn't just data access. It was an invitation. A voice filled the chamber, not from the speakers but from inside their minds. Clearer now. He was kind to me. Keanu. Blinked. Who? Christopher. For the first time, the thing that had stalked them stood still in the doorway, not as a threat, but as a shadow trying to remember the light. And on the screen, a new message appeared. Do you want to see what he saw? Keanu placed his hand on the terminal. The lights dimmed. The room began to pulse. And suddenly, everything changed. The last memory. The chamber didn't just darken, it deepened. The lights didn't fade to black. They shifted into something slower, something thicker, like memory was melting into the air. Keanu stood still, hand on the console, and felt the weight of it, like someone had placed the entire past inside his chest all at once. He wasn't standing in a control room anymore. Not exactly. The chamber dissolved into an open field under twilight. Distant sounds of war whispered through the wind. Boots, gunfire. Orders shouted and swallowed. The horizon flickered like an old film reel. And walking toward him, unchanged, unburned, alive, was Christopher, his brother. Keanu couldn't breathe. Christopher didn't speak at first. He just smiled, that same crooked smile from when they were boys before the world asked them to be strong all the time. And then he said quietly, "You didn't forget me." Keanu stepped closer. "I couldn't." "But they did," Christopher said. And suddenly the wind stopped. The field shimmered and cracked. The sky tore at the edges. Everything was unraveling. From the broken clouds above came fragments, voices, faces, places, the minds of those who had been lost, those who had been fused into Subject 9, each one screaming not for help, but to be remembered. The experiment hadn't erased them, it had trapped them. Their final thoughts played on a loop, feeding a machine that could never sleep. Keanu turned to the blur beside him. The shape of Subject 9 was there now, clearer than ever. Not one body, not one mind, but all of them bound together in something desperate, something unfinished. "Why me?" Keanu asked. "Why show me this?" A chorus of voices answered, layered like echoes stacked atop each other. "Because you don't run. Because you listen. Because you knew what it felt like to be forgotten." Tears welled in his eyes, not from sorrow, but from knowing. They had never asked for rescue. They asked for peace, to stop the endless cycle of their own memories chewing them apart, to finally rest. Christopher reached out, touching Keanu's shoulder. "You have to shut it down." Keanu looked at him. "But won't that destroy you?" "Not destroy," he whispered. "Release." The field faded. The chamber returned. The others were still there. Elias, Lana, James, and Subject 9 stood, silent near the entrance, eyes flickering softer now, slower. It wasn't chasing anymore. It was waiting. Keanu turned to the console. Behind it, a final protocol had appeared on screen. Project Black Echo. Termination sequence. "Initialize?" He hesitated. "What if we're wrong?" Lana whispered. Keanu looked back one last time at Subject 9. Its frame now trembling, its breath, a mechanical wheeze, stuttering. Not from malfunction, from fear, from hope. And then he pressed yes. The room shuddered, not violently, not destructively, but gently, like exhaling after decades of holding in a scream. The screens flashed each face one final time. Each soldier, each name, each moment, they were still human. Then faded to black. Subject 9 staggered once, then bowed its head, and collapsed. A faint blue pulse lifted from its body, like steam, like mist, and vanished through the ceiling like smoke returning to the sky. The silence afterward was not empty, it was sacred. They left the chamber without words. The lockdown lifted. The base blinked back to life, but the four of them, Keanu, Elias, James, and Lana, were changed. Not because they'd seen horror, but because they'd heard it speak. General Barrick met them at the gate, but he said nothing, either. He simply nodded once, like a man acknowledging a truth he couldn't deny anymore. Later that week, Keanu stood alone at the edge of the desert, wind tugging at his jacket. The sun was rising and the land was still, like it was finally ready to rest. He pulled a small dog tag from his pocket. It was old, worn, but the name was clear. Christopher Reeves. Keanu closed his eyes, smiled faintly, and whispered, "You're free now." He turned and walked away, not because he was leaving something behind, but because he had brought it home. And somewhere beneath the base, in the place no one would visit again, the last hum of that machine faded like a final breath. But far away, in a hidden file locked deep in a black vault, one sentence was added to a classified report. Subject 9 has been silenced, but memory never dies.